I'm 41, married for 12 years, and until last year I thought my life was the definition of stable. My wife, Lena, and I met in college. We weren't the dramatic type. No screaming matches, no cheating scandals, nothing like that. Just work, bills, occasional vacations, and raising our daughter. Life felt normal. Boring sometimes, sure, but in a comfortable way. Lena always said she wanted to learn how to drive confidently. She had a license but hated highways and busy intersections. I offered to teach her myself, but she said she'd feel less embarrassed with a professional instructor. That seemed reasonable. So she signed up with a local driving coach named Victor. Late 40s, calm voice, the kind of guy who looked like he'd been teaching nervous drivers for decades. At first, it was just lessons twice a week. She'd come home talking about clutch control, parallel parking, shifting gears properly. She sounded proud of herself. I was proud too. Looking back now, I wonder if that was the moment everything quietly started falling apart. But at the time, I thought it was just driving lessons. The first few weeks felt completely ordinary. Lena would come home after her lessons slightly stressed but excited. She'd tell me things like, "I didn't stall the car today," or, "I finally got the gear shift right on a hill." I remember teasing her once. "Careful," I joked. "You'll become a better driver than me." She laughed and said, "Victor says confidence is everything." That name came up more and more. Victor says I panicked too early. Victor says I should trust the car. Victor says my problem is hesitation. At the time, I didn't think much about it. If anything, I was grateful someone had the patience to teach her. I worked long hours and didn't always have the energy to sit in a parking lot practicing starts and stops. Still, there were small things. She started staying after lessons sometimes. "Extra practice," she said. Once she came home almost glowing with excitement. "I drove on the highway today." I hugged her and told her I was proud. But I also remember a weird thought crossing my mind. Why did she seem happier talking about him than about driving? The first real red flag was small. So small I almost ignored it completely. One evening Lena was in the shower, and her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. I glanced at it without thinking. The notification said, "Good progress today. You're getting smoother with your shifts." It was from Victor. I remember smiling at first. It sounded exactly like something a driving instructor would say. But then I noticed the time. 10:48 p.m. That felt late. Still, I shrugged it off. Maybe he just finished work late and was responding to messages. When she came out of the bathroom, I casually mentioned it. "Your coach texted you." She paused for half a second. Then she said, "Oh, yeah? He just gives feedback sometimes." Her voice sounded normal, but something about that tiny pause stuck in my head. I told myself I was overthinking it. After all, she was just learning to drive. And Victor was just a teacher. That's what I kept telling myself. Over the next month, the lessons became more frequent. Instead of twice a week, it turned into 3, sometimes 4. When I asked why, Lena said she wanted to build confidence faster. I supported it. I even paid for a few extra sessions. But something else changed too. She started caring more about how she looked before lessons. Makeup. Perfume. Nice clothes. Not just comfortable stuff you'd wear for driving practice. One day I joked about it. "Trying to impress the steering wheel?" She laughed, but it sounded slightly forced. "Please. I just want to feel good about myself." Fair enough. Still, there were other things. She started guarding her phone more. Messages would appear, then quickly disappear. Sometimes she smiled at her screen and tilted it away when I walked past. That quiet, nagging voice in my head started whispering again. But I shut it down. Because the alternative, the idea that my wife might be emotionally involved with a driving instructor, felt ridiculous. Or at least, I desperately wanted it to be. The turning point came on a random Tuesday night. Lena fell asleep early on the couch. She had one of those exhausting days where everything irritates you. Her phone was still in her hand. I wasn't planning to snoop. I really wasn't. But a message popped up while the screen was still lit. It said, "Today was intense. I can't stop thinking about it." My stomach tightened immediately. The sender, Victor. I stared at the screen longer than I want to admit. My brain started running through excuses for her. Maybe they had a stressful lesson. Maybe she almost caused an accident. Maybe intense meant something completely innocent. But something deep in my chest already knew. I opened the message thread. And in that moment, the quiet, boring life I thought I had cracked open. The conversation wasn't explicit. That almost made it worse. It was emotional. Personal. Lines like, "Today felt different. I like how relaxed you are with me. You trust me now." Her replies were just as warm. "I feel calmer with you than when I drive with anyone else. You make me believe I can do it." Then there were messages about staying after lessons. About sitting in the car and talking. About how being close in the driver's seat feels strange but nice. My hands were shaking. It wasn't a smoking gun yet. But it felt dangerously close. Then I scrolled further. 2 weeks earlier. Her message. "Today when you held my hand on the gear shift, I couldn't focus on the road." My chest felt like someone punched straight through it. That was the moment the truth started forming in my mind. Not fully. Not clearly. But enough to make me feel sick. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while Lena breathed softly next to me. 12 years together. A child. A house. Thousands of small memories. And suddenly my brain was replaying every conversation about those lessons. Every smile when she said Victor's name. Every late message. I kept telling myself maybe it hadn't gone that far. Maybe it was flirting. Maybe emotional. Maybe just stupid boundaries. But around 3 a.m. I realized something terrifying. I didn't actually believe that. Deep down, I already knew the answer. I just didn't want to say it out loud. In the morning she kissed me goodbye like always. "Lesson today," she said casually while grabbing her keys. I watched her leave through the window. And for the first time in our marriage, I wondered if my wife was going to see another man. Not for driving. But for something else. I confronted her that evening. Not dramatically. Not screaming. Just quiet. When she walked into the kitchen, I asked one simple question. "Are you sleeping with Victor?" She froze. Not confused. Not shocked. Just frozen. That silence lasted maybe 3 seconds, but it felt like a lifetime. Then she said the sentence that still echoes in my head. "It didn't start that way." My heart dropped straight into my stomach. I remember whispering, "So it did start." She started crying immediately. And I just stood there, numb. I wasn't even angry yet. Just stunned. Because the stupid joke I once made in my head suddenly became reality. My wife had signed up for driving lessons. And somewhere along the way, the man teaching her how to shift gears had become the man she was sleeping with. The full story came out slowly. Painfully. According to Lena, it started with long conversations after lessons. He would calm her down when she panicked during driving. They talked about stress, work, life. Then one day he placed his hand over hers while guiding the gear shift. "Just to show me the timing," she said. She claimed that moment changed the dynamic. They started lingering after lessons. Talking more. Sitting in the parked car. Then one evening they didn't leave the car right away. "That's when it happened," she said quietly. I didn't ask for details. I couldn't. Just hearing that was enough. I remember laughing bitterly. "So the driving lessons worked?" I said. She looked confused. I said, "He taught you how to shift gears?" She started sobbing again. But at that point something inside me had already started shutting down. The anger came later. At first it was just shock. But once the shock faded, rage filled the space. I asked questions she hated answering. How long? How many times? Did you think about our daughter? At one point she said. It wasn't planned. That sentence made me snap. You planned the lessons. You planned the extra sessions. You planned meeting him 3 times a week. She tried to say it was emotional first. That she felt seen. That he made her feel confident. I remember yelling something cruel. You needed another man to teach you confidence? She cried harder. But none of it changed the basic truth. For months she'd been seeing him regularly. Under the excuse of learning to drive. And every time she got in that car, she chose him over me. The next few weeks were chaos. We argued constantly. Sometimes she apologized. Sometimes she defended herself. It wasn't just physical. Somehow that made it worse. I asked if she loved him. She hesitated. That hesitation felt like another knife. She said she was confused. I told her confusion doesn't last 3 months. At one point she said she'd stop seeing him immediately. But the damage was already done. Trust doesn't break neatly. It shatters. Every memory suddenly looked different. Every late evening. Every smile. Even something as stupid as a gear shift suddenly felt like a symbol of betrayal. The house felt colder. We barely spoke around our daughter. And every time Lena picked up her phone, I felt that familiar knot in my chest again. The hardest part wasn't the anger. It was the humiliation. I kept imagining them in that little training car. Her hands on the wheel. His hand over hers. Teaching. Guiding. Comforting. All those quiet, intimate moments that should have belonged to our marriage. Friends started asking questions when Lena stopped taking lessons. Apparently she told people she had finished the course. I didn't correct them. I didn't have the energy. Inside, I felt like the biggest idiot alive. The supportive husband who paid for the lessons. Who encouraged her. Who trusted her completely. Sometimes I'd sit alone in the living room thinking, if I had just taught her myself, would any of this have happened? Or would something else have eventually broken us anyway? I still don't know. Eventually the affair ended. Not because of me. Because Victor apparently didn't want complications. That sentence still makes my blood boil. So the man who slept with a married student suddenly cared about complications. Lena came to me one night and said it was over. She said she wanted to fix our marriage. I asked one question. If he asked you to leave me, would you? She didn't answer immediately. That silence told me everything. Even after it ended, part of her still belonged to him. And that realization hurt more than the cheating itself. Because it meant the affair wasn't just a mistake. It was something she emotionally invested in. Something real to her. Something I apparently wasn't enough to prevent. We're still technically married. But our relationship isn't the same. Not even close. We go through the motions for our daughter. Dinner. School events. Family photos. From the outside, everything looks normal again. Inside, it feels hollow. Sometimes Lena tries to rebuild intimacy. She says things like, I want us to heal. I try. I really do. But every time I see a driving school car on the road, something tightens in my chest. Such a stupid thing. A little car with a second set of pedals. Yet it reminds me how easily trust can disappear. How something as ordinary as a driving lesson can destroy a marriage. I'm writing this here because I've never fully processed it. Friends know we had marital problems, but no one knows the real story. Not even my family. Part of me still loves Lena. That's the complicated truth. But another part of me looks at her and sees the woman who sat in a parked car with another man while telling me she was learning confidence. Maybe one day we'll recover. Maybe we won't. All I know is this. Trust dies quietly. Not with explosions or dramatic scenes. It dies in small moments. Late night messages. Extra lessons. Hands touching on a gear shift. If someone had told me a year ago that driving lessons would nearly destroy my marriage, I would have laughed. Now, every time someone says they're taking driving classes, I feel this strange, bitter thought in my head. Be careful who teaches you how to shift gears.